The historic 1998 Holy Day of Atonement address, Atonement, the Healing for a Sin-Sick Nation, is now available. Hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan speak on such topics as America, a Modern Nineveh, how President Clinton can save the country, Atonement, the Healing Balm, the 8 steps of atonement, what are they? You can add this historic address to your collection on CD or videotape for the unbelievable price of only $19 per item. To purchase this and many other lectures by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, call the Final Call Administration Building at 773-602-1230 or write to 734 West 79th Street, Chicago, Illinois, 60620.
Give me that beat, so.
The so-called American Negro have to be completely re-educated.
Yeah.
And the condition that he is now in, he's not fit for self.
If I had 100 sheep and one of them got away, I would leave the 99, go find the one.
To be completely made over again.
Look from the knocks and doors of Satan, I come create. Penetrate with force from the land of the lost. I'm coming like Muhammad got the devil on the run. Rising like the sun, keep your eyes on the one, look on base. Here to bring forth a reborn nation. Up against the norm, creating a new formation. This foundation that I be standing on.
The historic Million Family March is now available on video cassette, featuring the timely and inspiring message by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
The family is the basic unit of civilization. Therefore, everything must be done to care for the family unit.
The Million Family March on video cassette, only $29.95. Call 1-888-695-3982.
So I'm hoping and praying that God will allow me time on this earth to do something in the remaining years of my life to change the reality of the condition of human suffering among my own people and among the whole human family of our planet.
Brothers and sisters, members of the media, would you please receive the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Thank you. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we give him praise and thanks for his mercy and his goodness to the human family. The greatest of God's mercies is that he sends into the world prophets and messengers to bring divine guidance and revelation to the human family, that those who have strayed from the path of God and his divine favor may find their way back to God and to prosperity. I am a student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I could never thank Allah enough for this wonderful man that he raised among us. to lead, teach, and guide us. And I'm honored to greet all of you, members of the press and brothers and sisters, with the greeting words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language, Assalamu alaikum. Minister Yusuf, our great minister here in Springfield and the believing community, I'm here to be with Brother Minister Yusuf and the community. And I'm also here to speak to the wider community about the danger of the present course that our nation is on. As one who comes from a suffering group of people who have struggled mightily to be received as an equal member of the society, I find it distressing to be on the opposite side of the President of the United States at a time when the country is grieving over the tragic, horrific events of 9/11/2001, where nearly 3,000 innocent human beings were lost, and tens of thousands, even millions, have felt that pain and are still grieving and suffering over that strike at the United States of America. But for our president, who came to office under strange terms, standing over a divided House on September the 10th, but on September the 12th became the head of a united Congress and a united United States of America, then for him to tell the American people that he wanted to declare a war on terror, and the number one enemy at that time was Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda network. And in the traditional John Wayne style, we'll get him dead or alive. And then in a few months bombed Afghanistan, a country that has been torn by 20 years of war, 10 years of civil war, dropping on that country the latest in the United States arsenal of weaponry, the Daisy Cutter bomb. And now, after achieving a regime change in Afghanistan, is yet unable to unite the country and has not fulfilled the promise of rebuilding Afghanistan. Now Osama bin Laden has dropped from the radar screen, and all of a sudden the focus is on Saddam Hussein. I said last night on the 7th anniversary of the Million Man March that it was in the mind of President Bush when he assumed office that he would remove Saddam Hussein. And regardless to what the United Nations may do, I believe within the next 3 months or so, America will be at war with Iraq. I went to Iraq, and when I was met by CNN reporters, they asked me what was my purpose here. I said my purpose is to stop a war. I talked with everyone in that government, with the exception of Saddam Hussein, and we encouraged them to let the inspectors back in, to take that away from the government of the United States as a predicate for war. Now that Saddam Hussein, through his representatives, has said that the United Nations can have unfettered access to this country to show the world that he does not have what America says that he has, some of the talking heads that are in his government have said that it doesn't really make any difference, because as long as Saddam Hussein is in power, his insatiable desire for weapons of mass destruction will constantly lead him toward this, so there must be a regime change. In his latest talks, he has softened his speech, but he has not changed his agenda. And so it is my thought, as dangerous as it may be, to try to awaken the American people who are asleep in a dangerous time. The founding fathers of this nation, whether they thought of us as black people or not, they crafted a magnificent document that has stood the test of time for 260 years. But there are many administrations now who see the Constitution of the United States as an impediment to their desires for total control. It started, in my judgment, with Richard Nixon, who wanted to circumvent law to achieve ends that he felt the Constitution restricted him from achieving. As a result of his actions, the Constitution was enforced, and he had to leave office in disgrace, but within a few years he was rehabilitated, and he wrote books, and he said that the enemy of democracy is not communism. The enemy of democracy is fundamentalist Islam. So from that moment on, the presidents of the United States, each one in succession, has had some problem militarily with Muslim world. When Jimmy Carter was president, the Shah of Iran was overthrown, and Imam Ayatollah Khomeini came to power. And the American media demonized Khomeini. He was the boogeyman of that era of time. What was wrong with Khomeini? He was angry at America. He called America the great Satan. Was there justification for such language? He knew America's insatiable desire for oil. And he knew that Mohammad Mossadegh, the former leader of Iran, who nationalized the oil industry so that the Iranian people could benefit from their oil, the CIA, under an American president, overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh and placed on the throne, or as leader, the Shah of Iran. A regime change. A regime change into a leader that was nominally a Muslim, but was against Islam. So the Muslims in that country yearned to practice their religion in the purity of that religion. And so Khomeini, who lived in Iraq, Khomeini, who lived in France, inspired a revolution. But in inspiring this revolution, he talked about coming down that gulf and removing those that the British had set into power, even removing Saddam Hussein, who was a member of the Ba'ath Party, which is socialist in its concepts and ideology, and setting up pure Islam. So it was to the advantage of America to have a strong Iraq. So America armed Iraq. America gave Iraq the basic tools to form her weapons of mass destruction. America knew that some of this technology was used in the war with Iran and looked the other way. Now, this boogeyman has been created, demonized to the point where the American people feel it's a great thing to get rid of Saddam Hussein. 2,000 years ago, in the Roman Empire, there was a man that we all have come to know and love as Jesus. What was it that turned the people against him, that a chorus arose to say, crucify him? It's the tremendous effect of propaganda. We, the American people, are like fish, and the water that we swim in is the propaganda, the lies, the half-truths of a government and a media that is the tool of government in many cases, spreading the propaganda, the hysteria, and beating the drums of war. I feel it is my duty to travel the length and breadth of this country and awaken common American people, black, brown, and white, who, when the commander-in-chief sends them to war, it won't be Mr. Bush's family or Mr. Rumsfeld's family or Mr. Cheney's family. It'll be common America, black, brown, and white, Arab, Indian, Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, but it'll be common America. And as we grieve over the body bags or the lack of them for those at the World Trade Center who were incinerated to the point that they were giving the family members ashes from ground zero, I would hope that America would look at those twin towers that stood so majestically, that heralded to the world the genius of American economics and American architectural skill. And within the twinkling of an eye, two great pillars were brought to zero. That could be the future of the greatest nation in the history of the world. America can be brought to ground zero if her leaders don't guide her and govern her in her newfound position as the only remaining superpower and the greatest nation in the history of the present world, if America is not guided properly, her future could be the same as ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient Babylon, ancient Persia, all with empirical design to master the peoples of the earth. And now they're just a footnote in history. Will this be the future of America? Personally, I think we need a regime change in the United States. We need to have people in government who would be peacemakers. He says he's a Christian, but the scripture says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Then if the peacemakers are blessed to be called the children of God, then cursed are the warmongers who must be the children of Satan. I'll take questions at this point. Yes, sir. Would you state your affiliation, please?
Jim Polito, WGGB, News 40, ABC affiliate in Springfield. I know that on your last visit, you didn't meet with Saddam Hussein, but you have before. He has been characterized by many different people, and the president has said it himself, that he's not stable, referring to his mental state. Could you, because you have met him personally, could you please comment, when you sat with him, when you met with him, what type of a person do you think he is? And do you think he's capable of a lot of the accusations that have been made against him?
I think that most leaders of nations are capable of doing things to preserve power and to preserve what they think is in the interest, the best interest of their nation. Leaders do things that the general public might not know or be aware of. I was horrified at the Iran-Iraq war, which took the lives of well over 1 million young Muslims, Shiite, Sunni. When I met with Saddam Hussein shortly after the Million Man March, my theme was atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. I talked with him for about an hour and a half on that theme, and I asked him, would he work to reconcile his differences with the Muslims, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, etc. And these are his words to me. He said, Brother Farrakhan, I can assure you, we as Arabs have our difficulties, but I can assure you that in the end, we will be together. As I was leaving Iran, coming to Iraq, the Iranians led me to the border, and the Iraqis picked me up and my companions. There was a line of demarcation between Iran and Iraq, but when they brought me, the Iranians, to the border, they greeted their Iraqi brothers and they hugged and they kissed each other. The Iranians had tears in their eyes as they were leaving us and putting us in the hand of their Iraqi brothers. When I left Iraq, I was on my way to Baghdad to meet with President Hafez al-Assad in Syria, pardon me, in Damascus. There was a road from Baghdad to Syria that had not been used in 7 years because of the hostility between Assad and Hussein. Somehow they talked because of us. And that road was opened for the first time in 7 years. And we traveled that road. And when we got to the border of Syria, there was a mountain of dirt and stone about 12 feet high, separating the two nations. And I thought to myself, the wall in Berlin had come down, separating the East and West Germans. And here among Muslims was this big wall that we had to climb over with our bags. And when the Iraqis took us over that wall to our Syrian brothers who were waiting there, they hugged and they kissed each other. The fighters was at the top. The common people want unity. I cannot judge Saddam Hussein personally because I don't really know him, but he pledged that he would reconcile with his neighbors. Right now, if you go to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia does not want America to attack Iraq. Kuwait doesn't. The United Arab Emirates doesn't. The Emir of Qatar, the President of Yemen, none in the Arab and Muslim world with whom I spoke, even if they don't like him, they do not want an attack on Iraq that would slaughter an already weakened people. Saddam has kept his bargain. He's making peace with his neighbors. America today says Saddam is the greatest threat to world peace. And I humbly say to you that our present administration is the greatest threat to world peace, because all the rest of the world says, no, don't do this. And only Israel, the United States, and Tony Blair, not the British people, are willing to go along with an attack on Iraq. And what my fear is that this attack will unleash the dogs of war. And war will rage on our planet until the prophecies of the book of Revelation are fulfilled, that blood will be up to the horse's bridle. And if God had not stepped in to shorten those days for his elect's sake, not one soul would be left alive on the earth. That is where President Bush is leading the nation. And that's why I feel it's my duty, painful as it is, to speak out to the American people and ask the American people to wake up. If this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then let's take it back and make it such, because now it's the government of a few powerful, rich lobbies and interests that have stolen the country from the American people. Yes, sir.
Adam Gorlick with the Associated Press. Are you, after your latest visit to Iraq, are you convinced that the country and Saddam Hussein pose no threat to the United States or its neighbors?
Yes, I am. I am convinced that he is not a threat to his neighbors. I want to make a correction. The Declaration is 226 years old. I'm sorry. Whenever you make a mistake, you should correct yourself. Thank you, brother. No, I don't see him as a threat, but I see Iraq to the Arab world as Germany is to the European. The Germans are some of the most disciplined Europeans, and they're the most scientific and technologically advanced of the Europeans. That is the problem with Iraq. They are the most scientific, technologically advanced, and they are the strongest in the Arab world. It is that potential that Israel fears will be a threat to Israel. So there must be a regime change and someone put in authority in Iraq that will not develop the scientific leaning of that nation and allow them to get weapons of mass destruction that Israel has, so that there would be détente. There would have been war if India had atomic weapons and Pakistan didn't. So the moment Pakistan had these weapons of mass destruction and there was this border conflict over Kashmir, they had to sit down and work it out, because the potential between the two would be devastating for both people. Right now, Israel militarily is superior to the whole Arab world. They cannot harm Israel. Israel alone by herself, without the aid of America, could defeat militarily most of the Arab world with the weapons of mass destruction that Israel has and that she will use. So any Arab nation that even desires these weapons, even to counter Israel, must be seen as an enemy and destroyed. And that is why the attack on Iraq, they feel, must take place, not because of what they have, but what they have the potential of having that would threaten or might threaten the existence of Israel. It ain't got nothing to do with what President Bush is saying. In fact, his speech of last Monday night was probably one of the most deceitful speeches ever given by a president in the history of America, talking to the little people who really don't really know what is under what that man is saying. No. That's my answer to your question, sir.
When were you in Iraq?
2, maybe 3 months ago.
For how long?
Maybe 48 to 72 hours. Yes, sir.
Minister Mike Plaisance with the Union News newspaper here in Springfield.
Yes, sir.
You've spoken about the media. Could you tell us, in your opinion, what the media should be doing that we haven't been doing, what we're doing wrong, in your opinion?
The media must not be a rubber stamp for the propaganda that comes out of the White House. The same type of investigative reporting that was done by Deep Throat and the people that discovered and uncovered what they uncovered. That's the kind of reporting that is not dead in America, no. But you have very powerful writers who already have a point of view, and they're driving that point of view. And I think that this propaganda that I said, that the American people are like fish swimming in the water of propaganda, it doesn't allow the American people the right to truth. that would allow them to make a right decision and say to their representatives, this is the way we want you to vote. By blinding the American people with lies and half-truths, you have victimized the American people, and you've caused the American people to go along with a policy that if they knew the truth, they would not support. And that is why there's this rush to go to war, because the more the American people can listen to a Senator Byrd or Representative Kucinich from Ohio, or Senator Feingold, or Senator Kennedy, the more the American people can listen to the members of the Black Caucus and others who have another point of view other than those that are driving America toward war, the American people would gradually diminish in their desire to attack Iraq, and they would press their government to find a better way to deal with it. As I said before, this idea of a preemptive strike, America has always prided herself in not being the aggressor, at least making it appear that way. But for America to say, trashing the UN, that if you don't go along with a tough resolution, then we'll either go it alone or we and our friends will remove and disarm Saddam Hussein. This is dangerous. Already, what I read in the paper this morning and heard on the news, North Korea angrily said, yes, we have a nuclear program. What you gonna do about that? See? Now you got a problem in Asia. And don't you think for a minute that South Korea and Japan are gonna do America's bidding with North Korea. You're in trouble, America. You're in trouble. You can't fight all over the world. Hitler made that mistake, and you are following the same silly path. America has soldiers in 121 countries on this earth. You can't be the world's policeman. And I warn you, that if there is a preemptive strike, an aggressive move, no nation that is your friend will trust you. Nations will fear you because they can't trust you. China, you can't tell China now not to arm herself because she knows you're talking about a regime change there. Putin can't trust you. I don't care how much they accept your wealth. They will not trust you. America bargaining off the oil reserves of Iraq to France, to China, to Russia. Go along with us and we'll share the spoils with you. This is terrible. But as you do these things, the whole world gets more angry with you. Watch what I say. That incident in Bali, that will multiply 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, and you'll get alerts from your State Department. All American citizens stay indoors, or maybe it's better that you come home. This is not right. For the greatest nation on the earth, the world should see you and us as a savior rather than their potential destroyer. You want a follow-up question, then I'll come to you, and then, I'm sorry, sister. Yes.
I was just going to ask you again, based on that, then, are you a hopeful man for peace?
Yes, I'm hopeful for peace, but not on President Bush's terms.
Yes, sir.
I'm hopeful for peace on the terms of God. And I know that this man is going to war in the name of peace. Look at the crazy language. We want peace. This is lies and hypocrisy, deceit. But the end of it will be the destruction of the power of those who love to make war, and then peace will come to the earth. It is so sad that as we move toward the Christmas season, where we talk about peace on earth, goodwill toward men, that America is saying we have to attack sometime between December and January, you know, because the weather is right in that part of the world for the kind of an attack that America wants to give. Believe me, I'm hopeful, but not under this president will you see peace. Yes.
Thank you for the...
I'm going to
I'm sorry. Thank you for the second question. Speaking of... Jim Polito again from WGGB.
Yes,
speaking of violence, around Minister Youssef's mosque, there is a gang war going on. It's between two rival drug-dealing gangs. And recently, the minister himself was the victim of people who are allegedly drug dealers in that area. Following that incident, members of the mosque were involved in a type of violent altercation with some of these drug dealers. Those members are charged, and the police allege that it was retribution for the attack on the minister. Now, that's the allegation. I'm not saying what it is. I'm saying that's the allegation from police. That's the charge they face. I have two questions. One, if the allegation is true, what would you expect the minister to do with those individuals who are part of the organization? And second, what is your overall advice to the minister in dealing with the gang violence and the drug violence that we know is going on in that neighborhood?
Well, I just gave him and those brothers some counsel that I don't want to share with you right now, but I will say this. Our role in the community should always be peacemakers. Our role should never be violent with our people, except in self-defense. The gang warfare that is going on, it is our duty to bring peace between those brothers who are fighting each other over that which is destructive to our community. We believe that we can turn them in a better direction, not by imitating their behavior, but by giving them a better example of how we should live. And that is what drove me, sir, to call for the Million Man March. And on that mall, on that day, there were Bloods, there were Crips, there were gang leaders of all kinds. But on that day, peace prevailed. If it can happen for 24 hours, it can happen for 24 days, 24 weeks, 24 months, 24 years. It's that the spirit that we produced from God that calmed those waters and made those brothers act as brothers, that same spirit can come from Minister Youssef and the believing community to the gang community. Those gangs, that's my family. And I love them. Many of us who are now cleaned up used to do what they're doing. But it was the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that turned us around. Now, we can't become a gang to stop a gang. We have to be what God has asked us to be, and that is saviors of our people. Turn the gang, instead of being destroyers of our community, help them to become builders of the community. And that can happen. I leave you with the example of Malcolm X. Malcolm and his life prior to the teachings was just like those young men, and many young men that are in the nation right now. We went to prison. We did things we ought not to do. We had antisocial behavior that led us into conflict with law and with our neighbors. That was the life that Malcolm led. But once he heard the message, the same man that was in the depth of degradation turned and went to the height of elevation and started to retrieve the people that he came from. That's our role. Because out there are 10,000 Malcolm X's, maybe 100,000, maybe 1,000,000. They're in the prisons, hopeless, but if you turn them around, those young men and women can come out and make a contribution to the growth and development of the society. And that's the chance that we are to give them, and we can't give it to them if we have to hurt them to help them. There's a way out of that and a way around that. And we should always take the way around violence rather than become violent. Only if you are attacked do you have the right to defend yourself. But to attack makes you wrong in the sight of Allah. And it is He ultimately that we have to please. Thank you for your question. Now my sister, she has been so patient. And you know, I'm sorry. I have to apologize because my focus has been over here. And it's like I haven't seen you. But
well, thank you, and thank you for your continued inspiration. I'm Janine Fondon, and I represent African American Newswire. We're a newswire service that goes to over 1 million African Americans across this country. We're based here in Springfield. We also have a local newspaper here, and I applaud you for always supporting the black press, which we really appreciate. My question is about all that's going on in Zimbabwe and what's going on with Mugabe over there. And, you know, is this a model we really need to use over here to really hit that old boy network, really breaking down, looking at the economic injustices that we face here? What is really going to turn the tide? We have a lot of young people who are doing some very energizing things. And, of course, we're dealing with this age-old issue. So looking at what people are doing overseas, what is it that we really need to do here? And if the answer is unity, please inspire us all to really come together and seriously think about how we do that, if that's the answer.
thank you. If you don't mind, you had your hand up, right? And I would like to make her question the last question of the conference. So if you don't mind, I'll answer his, and yours will close it. Yes, sir.
Hartford Current. I was wondering if you could just tell us quickly exactly when you were in the Middle East and which countries you visited on your trip, and also if you could respond to charges of that Iraq and Iran and Syria and sort of the pretense behind Bush's claims that he's wants to go into Iraq is that they support terrorism and support Al-Qaeda throughout the world. And what do you say to that? And also, what would you rather have Bush do?
Thank you.
Could you turn your cell phones off, please? The feedback is going to mess up the tape.
I visited Qatar, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, And then I went to South Africa for the birth of the African Union, and then to Zimbabwe, and then to back to the United States. Did I miss any country? Did I mention Yemen? Okay. Now, your question on Iraq and Syria and as supporters of terrorism. When 9/11 took place, President Bush was justified in seeking to fight against terror. That gave Prime Minister Ariel Sharon the cover that he needed to justify what he was doing to those who are Palestinians, who are not terrorists, but are fighting a war of liberation against an army of occupation. And there's a big, big difference. In Syria right now, most of the hardliners against the state of Israel and her occupation of the lands of the Palestinians live. Iran supports not terrorism, but Iran supports the war of liberation. And that is why Hafez al-Assad, when he had a meeting with President Bush's father, they discussed what is the definition of a terrorist and what is the definition of a freedom fighter. The UN supports freedom fighting against regimes that are curtailing the human rights of the people. The UN is struggling to define and has not yet defined what is a terrorist, what is a freedom fighter. Now, those that fight to remove, let's look at the language. Go to your news, television, you see Israeli forces in the West Bank shoot Palestinian gunmen. See the language? They're in their territory. If they have guns in their territory, why would you diminish them instead of calling them Palestinian freedom fighters, Palestinian who are defending their territory? Because it's Israel coming against them, the language is different. They are gunmen, and Israel is defending herself. Now, you know, we're always going to be at odds on this point. You can believe that one. I don't see the Israelis as the victims. I see the Palestinians as the victims. And I have been there. I walked those streets. I know what it's like to live as a Palestinian under a so-called form of apartheid put on them by the Israelis. I know what it's like to drive down roads that the Palestinians drive down and what they confront on Palestinian roads, and I know what it's like to drive down Israeli roads and the difference between the two. I'm not saying that the Israelis should not exist there, because I look at it like this, you know. I always look at what God has in mind, try to see what God has in mind. If he permits it, then okay, but you know, justice, man, it's a tough thing. And the Israelis are not just in their treatment of the Palestinians at all. And these things they don't want the public to know. the suffering, the genuine suffering of the Palestinians that would make them so hopeless that they would strap a bomb on themselves and then go into a marketplace and kill people that they don't even know, that have never probably done anything to them. But what is the cause of that? And if you don't work to eliminate the cause, then you'll always suffer from the effect. So this talk from President Bush about Iran and Iraq, and they're supporting terrorism, they're supporting the genuine liberation struggle of those who are struggling to free their land from occupation. That's the point of view. That's the difference. Now, the Western governments have one point of view, and the Arab and Muslim world has another point of view. And the question is, how do you reconcile these two different points of view that seem to have so much currency on one side and the other? If you can reconcile those two views, you can bring about peace. But if you can't, war in that way is inevitable. And it will be bloodshed that will solve that problem. I would hope that it can be reconciled. I said this sister would have the last question.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up real quick?
It's not the real quick, it's the long answer, brother. Go ahead.
What about terrorism not related to Israel? For instance, there have been, the Bush administration has linked Al-Qaeda to Iran.
Let's talk
They
about
link them
that.
to Iraq, to Syria, to other
These
countries.
are fabrications.
Okay.
Al-Qaeda is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has a religious, puritanical Islamic doctrine that has no harmony with what Saddam Hussein is about. From what I have read, the government of the United States is asking the intelligence community to support the administration position by finding some way to link Iraq with Al-Qaeda. And the intelligence community has told the government there is no link between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, but the government continues to push that line because the first casualty in war is truth. Now, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, I liked Harry Belafonte on C-SPAN the other night, on CNN the other night, when Brother Harry said, our hands are not clean. I think that's a very good statement that America should look at her hands. Just take your hands out of your pocket and see how much blood is on the hands of America from America's policies. Now, I would like to give you a view from the Taliban. Afghanistan 20 years ago had women in government, women in school, women doing things in the society. Why? They were Muslims, but the government was socialist. The socialists have done more to liberate women than any religion, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, except during the time of the Prophet himself and the four rightly guided caliphs. Islam liberated women. Today, women are not liberated under Islam or Christianity or Judaism. It's a process now that women are coming to the fore in the three great monotheistic religions. Okay? The Taliban were just people in the society